Hello everyone, it's your favorite West Virginia in space here, and it's no secret that Marvel will continue to keep doing Marvel Zombies media for pretty much forever. The beaten dead horse has now come back as a zombie at this point. But I don't mind Marvel Zombies. I love some of the ideas in it, but I've always had beef with the fact that the characters who should be immune are never immune, like, basically ever. And then they come with, the hunger virus bypasses, like, all the stuff, and it's just, I understand, but, I swear the Marvel Zombie virus has, super plot armor or something. But that gave me a thought, an interesting introspection. What if you tried to, realistically, or more accurately-ish, tried to figure out which Marvel heroes would or would not be immune to the zombie virus, specifically one styled after the original Marvel Zombies hunger virus, but without its plot armor shenanigans. Also, as an important note going into this, how I'm counting this is I am generally counting, despite using the roster from Marvel Rivals, I am generally going with a generalized / loosely based on the 616 version of the characters. I am, however, trying to keep it standard to what their normal powers are, so I'm not using some hyper-specific character or state of that character in order to get what I want. Like to say, this character's immune because in issue 37 they had this rare power they never had ever again. No, I'm trying to stick to what the base logical abilities of the characters are that is fairly consistent. So, and to be clear, the reason I'm using the Marvel Rivals roster specifically is brand recognition. I could have used any roster of characters, and I considered using the zombie side roster, but then I realized the Marvel Rivals roster was far more popular, and if this video does well, I can do other characters anyway. So, let's begin. Now, the first category I'm going over is characters who I think would logically become zombies based on just their powers and abilities. Now, I do want to state something out the gate here. I am specifically counting the character if they already got infected. This is not how hard it is for a character to get infected or how likely, but if they got infected, would they be immune? That is a little different because some characters will be really hard to infect, but would be affectable, or vice versa. First up is just the zombie tier, like I said, those who just would be infected. First up is Black Panther. I thought he would have some kind of ability to, heal, but as far as I can tell, he really doesn't. Now, it's possible he has some minor abilities hiding somewhere, but there's certainly nothing that should really give him the ability to just not become a zombie. Next up is Daredevil. He has a lot of peak physical conditioning stuff, but none of his abilities relate to healing or anything like that, so he just has no real ability to do this. Hawkeye is consistently one of the most normal, non-powered characters in Marvel Comics, so it makes total sense that he's also just not immune to the zombie virus. Invisible Woman, despite having a lot of abilities to avoid getting bitten, if actually infected, like I said, she is completely just gone. She's just a zombie at that point. It's now the Iron Fist from Marvel Rivals, whose name I will not try to mess up today, does have some healing abilities, but since, as far as I can tell, he can't even fully heal minor injuries, I have no belief he's going to just magically out-heal a zombie virus that's taking out way more powerful beings, so sorry. Iron Man, he is, even if we don't count the suit, he just doesn't have any ability to heal himself like that, so he's just doomed to become a zombie if someone gets to the armor. And he'd probably be one of the more dangerous zombies if you ask me. Jeff the Land Shark. He's a land shark. None of his abilities would make him immune as long as he counts as a sentient being, so he's also zombie food. Mr. Fantastic is interesting because I've heard multiple people say he should be resistant to a zombie virus, and sometimes certain Marvel zombies play with that idea, but realistically, none of his abilities really do that. Like I said, he's hard to infect, but if you infect him, he's a goner. Penny Parker. Penny Parker really doesn't have that many abilities to herself, so she's a goner. Psylocke is confusing, because there's a lot of different versions of her with a lot of different abilities, but as far as I can tell, none of the versions specifically have any healing powers or anything of note that would likely counteract zombie virus. Next up is a Punisher. Despite often doing extremely well in Marvel Zombie stories, he is the Punisher. He is a normal guy. He is not going to get around the fact that he's a normal guy once he gets bit. Rocket Raccoon. Despite being augmented in multiple ways, none of them are healing related or regeneration or that kind of shenaniganery. Rogue is interesting because she has absorbed a lot of powers of characters consistently and sometimes long stick-wise that might allow her to get through zombie shenanigans, but that's inconsistent and not her actual native powers, so though she could probably get a healing factor for someone to try to fix it, she herself does not have the ability to heal a zombie virus, so no. Storm, despite having a lot of weather-based abilities, none of them are once again related to healing in any fashion, so another zombie. Next and lastly is the Thing. The Thing is interesting because a lot of because it's always been a big debate how his biology works sometimes, but in the comics it's been fairly consistent that underneath the rocks he has flesh and bone and blood and all that jazz. So while he has hard to infect, if you actually infect him, the Thing is, well, here's the thing, he's down for the count. So those are the confirmed zombies, if you will, the ones that I can't really think of any logical reason they'd be immune to a zombie virus. So, let's move on to the next category, which is a bit of an odd one. The next up is the category of characters who I think logically or reasonably could be infected, /turn, just don't have an immunity, but have some kind of hacks or ability or shenaniganery that, while leaving them infected, would allow them to counteract it or get rid of it or whatever. You'll see, but these kind of break down to one of two types. First up is Adam Warlock. He straight up has the ability to just come to life, or gain abilities based on his regeneration, or that kind of shenaniganery to basically restart life in his own cycles. So even if he could be infected, and he does sometimes have healing abilities, so that's even an if, he could just, or when he died, he would just restart and then be not infected, or specifically probably even have an immunity to the infection. Next up is Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is a normal person body-wise, so infected pretty easily, assuming he doesn't have some random magic to fix it. But more importantly, he can astral project his soul out of his body, so while his body will just be a rotten corpse somewhere, Doctor Strange can just exist as a ghost. Basically a ghost. How powerful he is in this state is somewhat debatable, but he's, like I said, it's a circumstance. It's also worth mentioning that this thing has explicitly been used in some Marvel Zombie media. So even within the Marvel Zombies, this ability works. I'm not usually counting what the actual Marvel Zombie comics say about who can be resistant to the immune viruses because it's stupid, but I do feel it's worth mentioning this one time. Magic is actually a similar deal. She can also astral project, so presumably, at least given the right taming or stress, she could also do the same thing as Doctor Strange, an infected body, but her mind/spirit is doing other things. Magneto is shockingly the same way. He also has the ability to astral project. Although you could debate this wouldn't count because it does, from what I can tell, it's a lot more primitive, but once again, it's kind of there. Moon Knight himself could be infected probably, but Khonshu wouldn't let that happen. Khonshu would keep reviving his favorite Mark Spector over and over again. There's no way he is not keeping him. I know one Marvel Zombie comic had, Khonshu have a zombie Moon Knight, but I don't think he would do that. That's pretty much an abomination that he probably wouldn't approve of. And also, Khonshu hates vampires. I don't think a zombie would be on his favorite list, and that's probably going to piss off Anubis, and Khonshu's already on the outside, so they can just gods. Next up is Jean Grey. Jean Grey has so many random healing, resurrection, and hacks-based abilities like that, with or without the Phoenix, that even if you could infect her, I don't think it would stick very long. And once again, this has also been used in Marvel Zombie media at least once. So probably infected, spend like an issue infected, and then would just resurrect herself. Whether that be in a new body or the same body, I don't know, but the point is she's not staying down. And last in this category is Scarlet Witch. Scarlet Witch has so many random hacks, reality warping, magic-based shenaniganery, including healing, that I don't think you could turn her. Now, granted, I don't think you could turn her, but Scarlet Witch is one of those characters that's not just a glass cannon, but a glass cannon on a loose swivel that's constantly spinning around like a top. Her strength is so constantly shifting that it's possible, given whatever circumstance or story she's in, she might not be able to heal herself or reincarnate or do whatever shenanigan reality warping to get out of a problem. However, I still think she could, so she has to go in this category. Anyway, that's kind of the two categories of people who kind of fall outside of the, I think this character could be immune, so let's go on with. Now, this category is maybe could fight off the virus. Now, that sounds kind of weird, but these are listed, in my opinion, for characters who have some minor healing or healing-based abilities that maybe let them circumvent the virus. However, I wouldn't put too much stock on that, especially for the purposes of a story, but I still think it's worth mentioning because they could maybe count. First up is Angela. Angela's has this purely based on the ground of she's an Asgardian. Asgardians have some healing-based abilities. However, the zombie virus usually just kind of attacks base things easily, so maybe this wouldn't count for anything. However, she does explicitly have some healing abilities, so I put her here. Black Widow. Black Widow has a a good healing ability for a normal human. Not much compared to many Marvel characters, but it is still there. And because it's an augmented ability, not something based humans have, it's possible she could be immune, though I wouldn't put much stock on that. Gambit is surprisingly has some healing abilities, although from what they say, it's somewhat primitive and not well trained in his skill set. However, he can replicate cells, cause the cells to heal faster, and do all kinds of stuff like that. It's not super good, but once again, it could help here. Maybe. I'm not super confident on it, but it is there. Loki, very similar to Angela, but he does have some other occasional healing-based abilities, which I don't think would help him. They do hypothetically put him slightly above her, but at least in the same tier. Luna Snow. Luna Snow should probably be infected. However, in every bit of media she's in, she has some based healing abilities based on her ice and cryokinetics that I just can't find a whole lot of information of, so it's entirely possible she could just freeze herself and then just zombie no more. Or the ice in her vein would do it, or I don't know. I don't think it's likely, but it's there. Mantis has a bunch of other vague healing-based abilities. Also, I think she can astral project, kind of, so there's that too. But I'm not entirely sure how to deal with that character. Namor, very similar situation. He has vague healing-based abilities that are stronger in water, but they aren't but how good, I can't properly tell, but maybe. Maybe he can. Especially because he's a human Atlantean immune thing. He's all over the place. Star-Lord, once again, somewhat vague healing abilities, natural to his people and other augmentations he had, and also temporarily he did steal the powers of the Greek gods that he may still have. Like I said, I don't know exactly how long he had in the comics, but it is there. And lastly in this category is Winter Soldier. Very similar to Black Widow in this case, he has improved healing abilities, though they aren't super great in a lot of ways, so I wouldn't put too much stock on them keeping him immune. But overall, those are the characters that, while I think should probably logically be turned to zombies if infected, do have some healing-based shenaniganery that could potentially get them out of it. Let's move on to the next category This next category is for characters who I say are unlikely to turn. Now, what I mean by that is, these are characters that have either some relatively impressive healing-based abilities, or some other factor in nature of their abilities that should maybe leave them immune to becoming a zombie, or resistant, or whatever you want to call it, but I don't feel it's certain in the sense that I feel definitively this character is immune to the zombie virus. So, once again, some wiggle room, but I do want to put it here. First up is Blade. Now, I admit I have some bias where I come from kind of the World of Darkness background where you can't double stack supernatural templates mostly, but even not counting that, he's a human-vampire hybrid with explicit regeneration, and a pretty powerful one at that. So realistically, I still think he's safe, also because he's kind of part undead already, kind of sort of, which feels like it should also counteract the being turned to an undead monster thing. So I think Blade's a safe bet. Like, if there's anyone in this category, I would say this guy cannot become a zombie. I would say this, but it's up there. Human Torch is next. Human Torch is already an odd case because I'm pretty sure his body would burn out the infection, but also is that it's noted that he doesn't have to take baths and brush his teeth and stuff like that because his body burns out any infection or dirt or anything like that. So realistically, his body should be immune. Even if you caught him with his pants down and he wasn't in a human form and he didn't turn into flame on mode either responsively or to explicitly get rid of the infection, I still think it's likely that even when the zombie version tried to turn on, it might do this. So but it is kind of iffy. Next is Spider-Man. Even within comics, Spider-Man is usually listed in the zombie class having some ability to fight the infection for a while, but not permanently. But even in mainline comics, he has very good regeneration abilities. Not Wolverine good, but very, very good still. So I feel confident that he could probably resist the zombie virus. And I don't mean in the sense that he slows it down, but rather fully fights it off, or just can't be infected. But there is wiggle room on that. Next is Squirrel Girl. Squirrel Girl has some vague healing abilities that I couldn't find much information on. So I'm going to put her in the same category as Spider-Man, just because I generally list characters like that as having any character with powers insert like Animal. If they don't explicitly deviate too much from Spider-Man's power template, I tend to assume that any kind of base abilities Spider-Man has kind of applies to them. So if Spider-Man's healing ability puts him in this tier, Squirrel Girl gets the same. But that's incredibly biased and could easily be wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. And lastly in this category is Thor. Thor is interesting because he also, on top of having all the other Asgardian stuff, has a healing ability. It considered even above the Asgardians, able to heal faster and better than even them. So once again, it's not a guarantee, but I feel it's reasonably certain to say that Thor should probably not be infected, but there's wiggle room for that. This category is probably the smallest, honestly, which is kind of interesting, but that does leave us with the next category of... Now, these characters are, for one reason or another, as far as I'm concerned, completely immune to the zombie virus. Bite them, scratch them, whatever you want to do, these people are immune. These either due to regeneration or some other factor outside that. There's no real logical reason these characters should be infected, at least if you ask me. First up is, surprisingly, Captain America. Now, this is gonna sound weird, but his regeneration ability is way, way better in the comics than people give it credit for. It keeps him forever young. The super soldier serum replicates in his body, effectively has altered his DNA, or both. And he's literally recovered in comics from death after having his brain shot. Now, granted, there is just enough wiggle room that if you wanted to put him in the tier below, I wouldn't blame you. But also because he's sometimes often explicitly listed as being immune to viruses and bacteria and such, I feel putting him in the never turning category is very appropriate. Even if it's ironic, because he's always getting turned in the comics immediately. Next up is Cloak/Dagger. Really, Dagger in this case. Cloak has some abilities to cheat death, but they're more inconsistent when you're dealing with zombies. Dagger just isn't getting turned. Her entire build power set lets her cure things and heal stuff with life force energy that she has to suppress, and she can already return from death on her own as a passive. And cure others and heal things. There is no reasonable logic universe where she gets turned into a zombie. Because even if you killed her and turned her, she just comes back. And I would separate Cloak, but given the fact that two resurrection abilities tied to each other, if Dagger's immune, then so is Cloak, practically speaking. Even if you say Dagger can't revive a zombie back to life, Cloak is never turning. No, at least not likely. Next up is Deadpool. Do I even need to explain why Deadpool is immune? If I explain why Deadpool is immune, then we're going to be here all day. There's no reason this guy should ever become a zombie, ever. The only possible excuse is that he somehow let it happen and turned off his healing factor just to be funny. But even then, I doubt it. But like I said, no logical reason Deadpool is ever getting turned. Next up, Groot. Groot has a lot of healing abilities, and can come back from pretty much anything, because as long as one bit of his branch gets away, he comes back. There is no practical or logical reason this guy is getting turned to a zombie. The only ways I'm pretty sure you could ever permanently kill this guy is set him on fire and make sure he turns to ash, and that's not becoming a zombie. Next up is Hela. Hela is, you think, who has the normal Asgardian stuff, but she has a lot of other random healing, immortality, and dead resurrection shenaniganery that there is just no reason this lady should ever become a zombie. Heck, half her body is already rotten, decayed / skeletal. She basically kind of is. So I'm not even sure what it would do. Heck, why isn't she been the villain in a Marvel zombie storyline or some kind of like faction of them or whatever? I don't really get that. Next up is the Hulk. The Hulk, even if we don't count Green Door shenanigans, is very good at regenerating and healing from stuff, even coming back from the dead on his own just because he feels like it. There is realistically no reason the Hulk should be turned. Now, to be fair, some versions of the Hulk are written or are weaker that I think that'd be more fair, but if we're going by a generalized version of the character, his healing factor alone is very close or identical to Wolverine's, so here we are. Next up is Ultron. Ultron is a robot. If I have to explain to you why a biological virus cannot infect a machine organism, I'm afraid you're a lost cause. Next up is Venom. Venom is Venom. I'm not entirely sure if you could even infect him given how weird his biology is, and I tend to say no. I guess you could also ask this question, is Eddie Brock capable of turning? Maybe. The Venom suit could probably also just kick the virus out anyway. So I'm inclined to say Venom or Eddie Brock, or however you want to look at it, is probably just fine. And last, but certainly not least, Wolverine. Wolverine is the granddaddy of everyone, points out that this guy should never be turned to a zombie, and yet outside of one instance, it keeps happening. it's pretty self-explanatory. Wolverine can heal from all kinds of shenanigans and stuff and everything, even from death occasionally. There is no world where this guy becomes a zombie. It's just, and every time it happens, it just you just realize the writers are just being stupid and just giving too much Mary Sue plot power to the hunger virus. Anyway, that's my list altogether of every Marvel Rival characters currently in the game at the making of this video. Would they be immune to a zombie virus? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, of your opinions of where characters should be and other stuff like that, and what other Marvel characters maybe could I do in a second video of this. Or if you didn't like this video, you can dislike it and tell me how I'm stupid down below, and the zombie virus overpowering everything makes perfect plot sense because stupidity. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.